I started making my own work, solo work, in the early 90s. And Bruno came to see one of those solo pieces and said it would look really good if there were more people in it, but of course that would cost a lot of money. And Bruno's an interactive designer at the time, and so what we ended up doing was actually making an interactive CD-ROM, Windows 98, based around that live performance that Bruno had seen me do. And it was really refreshing for me at that point, because I actually had something, a disc that I could give to somebody of some of my work. Unlike a painter or visual artist having an object to show, with dance it's often live, or it's a video or a film. But with the interactive CD-ROM, it meant that other people could play with my choreography, so to speak. So in a way, that's how we got together. My interest in interactive media began really with meeting Bruno and Bruno's interest in my work.
One of the things that we'd realised was that in the UK and in London, and probably in other countries as well, I'm not exactly sure, there seems to be quite a limited audience for dance works. And if we were going to see performances and you see the same people at all these things, it seemed like the audience was fixed at a particular size of this same group of people who went to all this stuff. And we thought, well, it might be interesting to by adding interactivity to actually try and reach a different part of the audience, because most of my friends, they would absolutely hate to go and see any dance performance because that would be the worst possible thing that they could ever do, and they'd much rather play the PlayStation and watch football. And when we started working together, we realised that our friends would come in to see our work, and it was because we were, even though it was a dance performance, because might be computer animation, or there might be interactivity, or there might be some sort of special effects, they could quite easily sort of get a handle on that, and they would be happy to watch the dance bit kind of, as well. So, and that was, I guess, a spur for us to kind of investigate more this way of working. And also because we were very interested in giving the audience member somehow a sense of ownership of the work by allowing them to engage in it in slightly different ways, by possibly controlling the choreography to a certain limited extent through our interactive things like our CD-ROM that we made.
Questioning, who's the performer in a way in the work. That's something that we're still toying with. It's not necessarily that we've moved away from dance, but we've looked at it and dissected it and in a way looked at more of the ergonomic aspects of movement and motion and those in relationship to graphics.
There's kind of certain complexity, and because we're working with different, multimedia means many media, and you're working with sound, and you're working with animation, maybe film, interactivity which needs programming, and it's very hard to actually be good at all of those different types of skills. So we always felt that we would try and get people who are good at doing the other bits that we couldn't do to join us. And and some of our collaborators, some of them are performers, and they're also cameramen, and we try and every person that we work with has a few different roles that they fulfill within the group, and I guess we bring in different people for different projects. It depends on what kind of thing we're doing.
Rather than act dancing in the motion capture studio, the motion capture company came here and we worked outside on the lawn, so that we didn't have to rehearse bending under a tree or slipping on a stone or so on. We could actually do that for real outside on uneven terrain with the environment around, so in a way it was more authentic. So there were kind of dual things happening in the forest, both being in camouflage and being still, but also trying to work out what animals and creatures and the movement inherent in the forest, and how to translate that back into the virtual environment.
We've got to make the movement of performers come into the 3D world. Motion capture is it tends to get used all the time for three uses. There's gaming, there's a kind of a military, a kind of medical thing where they do what they call gait analysis, which is where you work out how people are walking and things like that. And I guess for sort of Hollywood kind of special effects, the most famous one, of course, is the Gollum character in the Lord of the Rings. The performer wears a special suit which has different types of sensors on, and they go into usually a special environment which picks up the movement of the sensors. Some of the systems are using magnetic, some of them are electromagnetic, some of them are optical. They're different types of technology, but they all do exactly the same thing, because they give you a kind of data file which has recorded as a series of frames all of the positions of all the sensors on the performer's body, and from this you can extrapolate where the performer is in 3D space, and then you can apply that to a 3D model of a character, as you can see here, and then that 3D character moves around with the performer's motion. I suppose we were interested in working with a 3D game engine and making an immersive environment because our work previously had been about trying to allow the users to somehow control the choreography or get a view of a performance. And we'd worked with CD-ROMs and DVDs and various interactive things, and we had realised that they were really good because you could. Those technologies were good because we could allow the audience some degree of control, but it was always like they were somehow outside of the actual performance, because unlike a real performance, you can't, well I suppose you can, but you can't actually, you're not supposed to sort of, let's say, run onto the stage and run around the performers, and we always felt that there was some sort of a degree of separation between the stuff we'd done before and the actual audience, because they were not in there as well. There's also about the levels of realism as well, because obviously we kind of, in a way, want to make it as realistic as possible, but at the same time, there's a technical limitation because you actually want it the computer to be able to display it and actually to run it at a reasonable frame rate. And I guess what we've sort of gone for is we realised that of course we can never ever make anything as beautiful as a real forest at all. There are so many things, so many 3D things you have to model, so many things you have to leave out, you have to make so many compromises, and so instead what we've tried to do is to make the 3D worlds have somehow inner consistency or inner logic, so that they are completely consistent with all the other elements of it. Obviously we had to compromise because we couldn't individually model every blade of grass, but we sure would have liked to, and there are many compromises we've had to make, but I guess the interest for us is we are interested in seeing the sort of virtual representation of the natural, and the contrast between this piece and the video installation is apparent. And what we wanted to do was have realistic motion in this 3D virtually artificially constructed world, and then have sort of unrealistic motion in the real world of the video installation.
When we were in the forest in camouflage, there was this incredible sense that your hearing got much better, your sight got much better by spending time in a certain environment, and that sort of augmentation of the senses for me was so important to the way in which we ended up making some of the choreography for the motion capture, because it meant that you couldn't really lie dancing, I don't mean lie down, I mean actually fib. We had to be very careful, knowing the things that would work in the motion capture suit.
But we have been considering this this virtual environment and this exhibition and this kind of concept for a really long time, and we've sort of have been sitting on it. It's sort of been sitting on the shelf, waiting to happen for a couple of years, and then the marvellous opportunity to come out here and do residency in an actual forest sort of came up, and so it's kind of perfect, really.
There's something going on in here which is a game in a strange sort of ways, that you're again trying to look for the person, but maybe you walk into the gallery and you don't know that, which I also really like. The idea that you either find the character, see the character or not. It's unlike a lot of our other work. This particular piece I think is pretty linear rather than non-linear, in that the editing process for me was actually eventually revealing the character. So we're coming to the end of the lead now. And I suppose that there's another thing as well. Again, I've talked about how being in camouflage and witnessing the forest, being in camouflage is a very different thing than just going for a walk in the forest. And I suppose with this, rather than over-explaining it, there is this sort of idea of when the character is there, he's observing who. When we were actually making it, the camera was observing the performer, but the performer was also observing the forest and the camera.
It's supposed to be video wallpaper, that's how I think about it, rather than a kind of, let's sit down and be entertained and watch a film. It's supposed to be something that gives you maybe, instead of having to engage with it on one level of your brain, with figuring out what's happening in the story and all the rest of it, this is more like, on a slightly a different level, so it's more meditative. And and I've always been quite interested in wallpaper, so generally. And our other video works are kind of maybe similar, trying to give a similar feeling, so that it allows the viewer to kind of come to their own conclusions about the meaning. We don't want to make it mean the same thing to the audience as what it means to us, and so we hope that people get their own meaning from it.